officially, let's kick this off. It is my pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to this Investor Mixer AMA on behalf of the back room, which is part of the fourth floor. Today's topic, LP Curious. Are you LP Curious? We know many of us at the fourth floor are. So we've brought together a powerhouse panel of leading women general partners of venture funds who will help us explore the advantages of investing as a limited partner and why it really might be a great option for many women. So we're going to hear about pros and cons, hear a little bit about, sort of what is the difference like between investing as an LP versus an angel on very high level. Also just what things we should be considering when we're contemplating how to get involved as investors. So now just a little bit of housekeeping. I mentioned this before, but for those of you who are just joining now, please be sure to keep yourselves muted and also your questions ready. If you want to put a cue before you type the question in the chat, that will help us quickly find them and make sure that we can cover as many questions as possible during this discussion. There will be allocated times at the end of each discussion point for questions from the audience. So, depending on how things go, if there are a lot of questions, we'll try and sift through them and then get to them at 3 different points in the discussion. We'll ask you to give us questions. If there aren't as many questions, we'll kind of keep the discussion flowing. So we'll see how that goes. Just don't be shy. If there's no question is silly. This is the point of this, so please ask. Okay, so before we dive in, a very brief word about the fourth floor, because I have to. We hack the system and we provide a place for women, especially lawyers, but not just lawyers, to initiate and advance for-profit board careers, earn equity, and also invest. And we do this a few different ways. We do this by tapping into the underleveraged value of women entrepreneurs. And we also help women founders access funding and growth opportunities by both leveraging their advisory and governing boards and our backroom investment club, which has just come out of beta and which this investment series is a part of. So if you are not a member of the fourth floor, but you're interested in joining us, and you think you might meet the membership criteria, please consider signing up, registering for a platform tour, and or come to our next board boot camp in April. I think it's April 13th. We do these periodically. Both the platform tour and the board boot camp are just a really great way, if you don't know, to really learn what we're all about and see where you fit, if you fit. Also, I think we're dropping in the chat just links that will be helpful to get you to those places, including applying to become a member. And then also I want to mention anyone who's here at this event, you can sign up for a backroom membership only, or at least sign up to be on the wait list for that. So we're dropping that application in the chat as well. That is something that currently is not live in our platform, but will be soon. And so this is a chance to access that. So that's if you're not necessarily interested in full membership and pursuing a board career, but you are interested just in what's going on in the back room at the fourth floor, then please put your name on the wait list. Okay, so I think that is most of my housekeeping. So I think we can get to the point of today and why everyone is here, which is becoming a limited partner. What does that mean? Who qualifies? Why does it make sense to do this? Why should this be an option? Why should this be something that we're thinking about when it comes to investing as women? So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to the amazing panelists that we have assembled here today to help us have this conversation. So they will come join me in the spotlight. We have Virginie Raphael. She comes to us from FullCircle. Hello, Virginie. We have Gale Wilkinson of Vitalize Venture Capital. And we also have Leslie Feinzaig of Graham and Walker. Welcome, all of you. And I am now going to let each one of you introduce yourself better than I can introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and about your funds. So let's start with you, Virginie.
Yes, thank you, Breen. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. Hi, everyone. I'm Virginie Raphael. I am the founder and managing partner of FullCircle, a pre-seed fund that I run here out of New York. My focus is on creating a more diverse, inclusive, prosperous workforce. So I'm sector agnostic, but very focused on that outcome. I came a long way off from venture. I thought I wanted to be a diplomat when I started my career. Pivoted away from that and started my career in banking at Lehman Brothers to summer of 07, which was a really interesting time to start in banking, let alone Lehman. I was in public finance for 5 years, raising state and local government funding. And then was recruited out of Lehman by Bradley Tusk, who was starting a regulatory and political consulting firm, which by way of serving as an advisor to Uber became a venture capital fund eventually. So I spent 10 years at Tusk, started making some angel investments as I was thinking about next steps, and which led to FullCircle. But it was a long journey there and not a linear path like many people in venture have, which is exciting. And I'm happy to share any and all lessons learned on that journey with you today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Virginie, and welcome. Really glad to have you here. Gale.
Hey guys, I'm Gale Wilkinson. I'm the managing partner and founder at Vitalize. We're based out of Chicago, but we've got partners sitting in LA and San Francisco as well. We invest in seed stage, future of work deals. So I'm currently raising a $50 million fund too. Historically, my first job in venture was starting Irish Angels. So that was an angel network of about 300 people. And while I was there managing that for 9 years, we did 50 million across 80 companies. And then I've also done quite a few angel deals myself, as well as starting doing some small LP checks into other emerging managers. Really excited to join you all today.
Well, thank you, Gale. We're really excited to have you join us here today. Leslie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me to the fourth floor. Good to see you all here today. I'm Leslie Feinzaig. I am the founder and managing director of Graham & Walker Venture Fund. I was a career tech executive and strategy consultant turned startup operator. I founded 2 companies back in 2017. I, in the process of attempting to raise venture capital for my last company and failing to do so, I started a Facebook group for women founders who were trying to scale their companies and raise venture capital. And that Facebook group went from a 25-person Facebook group in 2017 to a 50,000 person community today. The Female Founders Alliance is one of the most prominent communities of women founders in the country. We have more than 26 or 2,700 startups that are a part of the core community. And I raised the venture capital off the back of it in order to invest in the best tech companies that we come across. Graham & Walker Venture Fund invests in pre-seed and seed stage tech companies led by women. We are, fun fact, named after the first woman CEO of a Fortune 500 company and the first woman self-made millionaire. And so everything that y'all are doing here today is very close to the mission in my heart. So thank you for having me.
Love it.
Our community is no longer in a Facebook group because Facebook is, of the past. But I'll share ways to join later.
Awesome. Yes, please do. And just a fantastic story. Just love that. So great. Welcome all of you. Okay, so let's dive into our first discussion topic, which is really an opportunity to hear from all 3 of you about the different paths that you took on your way to becoming a general partner of a venture fund. We got to hear a little bit about it right off the cuff, but it would be great to hear a little more about some of the insights and the wisdom that you can share based on your own individual path to get where you are today, right now as general partner of a fund. So Virginie, let's start off with you.
Yes. So as I said, I spent 10 years at Tusk Ventures, which started as an advisory firm. So there was no venture component to the firm when I joined it. And then we slowly but surely evolved in that direction. So I was fortunate to be part of their first fund, including fundraising, scaling the team, figuring out on the operational side, kind of who did we want help from on the fund administration side, and So it was a really great experience. It was lucky that I was just there, and they needed someone who knew the firm intimately and specifically what we could do to support our portfolio companies, because that advisory piece was pretty key in terms of providing that regulatory advice to the companies that we were investing in. So because I had the chance to raise and run a couple of funds and get pretty deep on the operational side, I felt as though I was ready to take the next step. In venture, often the fund size kind of grows over time. So by the time you get to fund 3, the strategy of the fund has evolved a little bit. You're no longer necessarily investing in very early stage companies. It evolves into a fund that invests often in Series A, B, and above company. And it just started to be a little bit different than what I wanted to focus on, which is pre-seed companies, founders who are as early as they come. And so I went down the journey of figuring out what made sense to me, what fund structure was appropriate for what it is that I wanted to do, what the investment strategy was that I wanted to run with. And so I did a lot of research over the fourth quarter of 2020 and started initial discussions in Q1 of 2021. And then the fund was launched in June last year. So pretty new still, but I took a very entrepreneurial approach to how I was building and conceiving of FullCircle, and really wanted to run it like a startup. So I have a little bit of a different model, which I can go over a little bit later perhaps, but that's how I thought about it, is how do I become a founder myself? How do I think about running the firm and building the firm like the entrepreneurs that I want to back? And what does this all look like in the very long term? Because this is the last stop on the journey for me. So it needed to be very authentic and very appropriate for what it is that I wanted to do and for my values and the mission that I wanted to accomplish.
Great, awesome. Gale, how about you? Maybe can you share a little bit, also about, your unique journey, and then any insights, perspective that you have when it comes to this topic that you've gained from, that journey?
Sure. I would call myself an accidental VC. I had started 2 businesses before starting Irish Angels that both failed. So my third startup was a venture firm, and I hadn't thought about VC, but when the opportunity presented itself, I took a step back and said, I would love to start a business to help others start businesses, and realized very quickly that I love venture. It's a good fit for me personally. And over time ran deals through SPVs, and eventually in 2017 raised my first fund that we deployed in 2018. So it's great that I ended up in venture, and it's been a lot of fun, but it's also been really challenging for lots and lots of reasons. One of which is being a female in the industry. And regarding Breen's question around what insights about this topic I've learned, I've made it a mission, quite frankly, to figure out how do I get more women to invest in startups and in funds. And so in probably 2013 or 14, fairly new in my time at Irish Angels, I realized that women weren't joining as quickly as men would when I went out to do membership drives. And I tried to understand what was happening there. And it ultimately boiled down to fear. So fear of not knowing enough, fear of feeling like this is not something that I'm good at. It's for somebody else. I don't have the right skill set. And I don't know that I feel comfortable enough taking my hard-earned capital and deploying it in this fashion. So it's been very near and dear to my heart over the last 10 years to figure out how do I make it more accessible for underrepresented individuals, including women, to figure out how it makes sense for them to get started in this asset class.
Awesome, thank you. How about you, Leslie?
Okay, let's see, path to venture. So I one thing that you should know about me is I had a before and after career. So I was born and raised in Costa Rica, where I had the first part of my career. I graduated college after 9/11, so I couldn't get a visa to work anywhere, and I went back to Costa Rica, basically did whatever I could for 4 years until 2005, when I got into Harvard Business School. And every job I've had post Harvard Business School, I I actually didn't know existed before. Like I didn't know venture capital existed. I didn't know what product manager was. I didn't know, I mean, I'd heard about consultants, but I'd never heard about McKinsey. And so like I kind of came into venture capital through the startup path. And I tried going in the traditional route, like getting a job at a venture capital firm twice in the past 10 years. The first time there was a horrible interview that ended in a crying incident, which is not uncommon if you know me. And the second one was just a more dismissive email that said something to the effect of, oh, you don't, we tend to hire a different type. And that was more the successful serial entrepreneur type. I was like, okay, but I can't be successful entrepreneur. There's a catch-22 situation happening here. And so for a long time, I just thought, as many of you, like everything that didn't go in my career as I wanted it to, I just internalized and thought that there was something wrong with me. Like there's, why would I question? They keep saying it's a meritocracy, so maybe I just don't have the merit. Maybe I need to work hard enough, lean in more, like all of the things. And it wasn't until like that experience of trying to raise venture capital for myself, where I was like, hey, on paper, I have all the things that you say you invest in. My business has all the traction that you say you invest in. And yet I get to the room and I just don't break through. Like around that time is when PitchBook published the first data. And I'll never forget this, partly because PitchBook said that in 2016, only 2.19% of venture capital had been invested in women-founded companies. I remember the number because I created a Twitter account, 2.19, and that became the Female Founders Alliance later on. And it was that moment when I was like, oh, it wasn't me. Like it was all of us. It was systemic. And from that point, that was 5 years ago. From that point on, it's been like discovery after discovery after discovery for me. It kind of in that process, right? Like one thing that happened was, I had built this community that was, I was trying to bootstrap and like pay for people's salaries with whatever I could with corporate partnerships. But I realized pretty early on that if I wanted to dedicate my life to this, if I wanted to dedicate my life to accelerating the success of all of your companies, then the way to make my livelihood would be to invest in you. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, so if this is my life, then I'm going to be an investor. And then came the moment of actually raising the venture capital fund, which I'm sure we could do a whole panel around. All of us here have done it. Raising a first fund for someone who's not breaking out of venture is like, it's not like, no, it's like so hard that it feels deliberate that you're not supposed to succeed. And much like Gale, the process of going through that made me realize how little women invest in each other, like how little we talk about it, how little, like how kind of socially unacceptable and icky it is. Whereas you get to a room with the guys and the guys are like sharing deals like their beer, right? Like it's a positive that you're telling each other what you're up to and inviting each other to invest in all of these things. But for women, it's like, I went to a dinner once with Sally Krawiczek, and she quoted internal data from Elevest that said that women are more likely to talk to each other about death, sex, and their weight than we are to talk about money. So like, think about that. Like you would rather tell someone about sex with your partner and how much you weigh than how much you make. Like, that's just stupid. And like, I took that and I was like seeing this throughout my own fundraising, realizing that like I couldn't get through to the women. They would tell me, oh, I don't talk to my girlfriends about money. That's just weird. And meanwhile, the guys were like the opposite. And like, I think that the only way that we get around this is we have to demystify it. We have to talk about it like it's a good thing. Like, I'm not asking you for money as though it's a charity. I'm inviting you to the best party ever, like to the best opportunity that I will ever have to invite you to. And I think when we change our mindset from like, oh, I'm embarrassed to ask because like it's going to sound like I'm asking for money. You're not asking for money. You're inviting someone to be a part of something special.
Right. I love that, that mindset shift. And actually now for this sort of second discussion topic, if we could take a deeper dive there, because I think in a lot of what we just heard, there were some common themes that, you know, relate to gender, relate to cultural influences when it comes to gender, like to our gender identity. And it does feel like there is some mindset shifts that really need to happen if things are going to change. So I kind of want to, you know, dive a little deeper in some of those points that we heard. And Virginie, I want to start with you because I know when we spoke, you know, before this panel, you made some really amazing points about dissonance when it comes to charity, right, versus investing, and how that also can be really tied up in gender and cultural influences that have led women to just make assumptions or feel differently about investing that a lot of times are just not based in reality. Like there is this dissonance between, you know, what we feel and what is true. So maybe you could speak a little more about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think we started talking about kind of the number of assumptions that LPs make when they are contemplating a female-led fund. And so I know many people on this call can relate, right? So typically, LPs made two assumptions. Because I was a solo GP and obviously a women-led fund, I was going to only invest in female founders. That was kind of the working assumption. I don't happen to have a gender thesis for reasons that, again, can be a whole entire panel of itself, but it was just not my case, right? My thesis is to create a diverse workforce. Naturally, many of the founders who are going to work on those issues invest a fair amount at the intersection of care and work. So yes, who's going to build the childcare infrastructure of tomorrow? Chances are the people who are most affected by it, i.e. women, are going to get to work on it, right? So that probably means that I will invest in more female founders than perhaps some of my colleagues, but it shouldn't have been the working assumption necessarily. Then two was, okay, so you're going to have an impact fund. And I said, it depends how you define the impact fund, right? But most of the LPs very clearly meant concessionary returns, because that's the old-fashioned definition of impact investing, is that you can have impact and then you can have some amount of returns, but the total sum of the two will be the return profile of the fund, right? So there's this assumption that impact will take away from your performance. And that's just not true, right? I happen to think that if I want to drive the type of returns that my investors are actually expecting, I will need to invest in impactful companies for sure. But it's not impact versus investing. It's just all investing is impact investing in my mind. And we need to change the narrative there. So that's one thing. The other thing that I realize is that often when I talk to women about my fund, they were deploying lots of capital, lots of dollars on the philanthropic, back to Leslie's point about like, this is not a charitable, right? This is very much a for-profit fund that will generate outperformance. And you will make money by investing in it, right? So this is an opportunity for you to actually invest in something that will give you even more dollars, right? So it was very unclear to me why women were so comfortable cutting very large checks to philanthropic organizations, right? And often kind of own that charity purse, so to say. But when it came the time to make an investment decision, it was kind of like, well, let me talk to my financial advisor, or let me talk to my husband, or versus the many men who I would meet and like within a half-hour call, right, would decide yes or no on the spot whether to invest or not. And that was really striking to me, right? Because our value prop here is that, yeah, you're going to make an impact because of the companies that we're going to invest in, and you're going to make money doing it so that you can multiply your impact and invest in other things, and or continue to also make all of those charitable donations. So that was quite interesting to me why that was, but certainly something that I found to be true time and again. And I don't know what that is.
Thank you, Virginie. And I'm sorry, I think my internet may have just frozen. So hopefully everyone can see and hear me. My apologies for that. Yeah, thank you for all of that. Just really great points, and I think really resonate with this idea of a mind shift that needs to happen. Gale, you talked about women being scared, and that women, you know, being scared and having fear affect the decisions they're making. On the one hand, makes women hesitant to put their money where their mouth is. Also can lead to making it harder for women to feel comfortable.
Breen, I lost you.
I think we all lost her.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're having a little bit of trouble. Let me see if I can pick up on the thread there. Oh, Brina, you're back?
Oh.
Sorry, we lost you for a second.
Oh, I've just been talking the whole time. Oh,
We lost you at comfortable.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, no, I was deep into.
Oh no. Okay. Well, life in the tech world of today, right? Did you catch the first half of that, Gail? Do you want to start to address it and then maybe she'll pop back in?
Yes, I think it's the question is around, this is scary. How do we get comfortable making the leap into either direct or funds? And so I can share my first story. And I think this is really common. I was in finance. I had an MBA. It was 2016. I'd been investing out of Irish Angels for 3 years. Nobody had ever asked me to invest, and I had never thought about investing my own cash. Now, granted, I didn't have a lot of it. I still take like under market salaries, but it wasn't until a friend of mine from business school asked me to invest $5,000 into her startup, and I did. And I realized after I did that, you know, it's very different for me to invest my limited partners capital versus my own capital. And I felt the fear as I wrote the check and gave it to her. And then over time, I started to feel comfortable doing a little bit more as I had the cash to do so. And what I realized is it was so important for me to get the reps. You have to feel the pain of losing the money. In fact, out of my 45 angel deals, the one I've lost is that very first check, though I will invest in that founder again. She just didn't find product market fit, which is fabulous. So you have to feel that pain, and you have to feel the joy of, wow, I invested in a great company and they're doing well. And eventually, you know, we get to the point where we are excited because we've had realizations and everything in between. So the most important thing to do is figure out, how do we get into the game by actually getting out our checkbooks? And it's deciding, for me, I've realized over time as I work with people who are trying to get into this asset class, it's figuring out what % of my investable assets can I put into this class. The old school thinking on this is no more than 10%, which is a great starting point. I personally do way more than that, and I'm very, very happy that I have. But it's truly authentic and personal to you. So figuring out what you have to invest, and then you want to have a portfolio style effect in your investing, which means you want to pick a number of fund managers and or a number of direct deals over a 3 to 5 year period. And that allows you to figure out, based on your total dollars and how many deals or funds you want to get into, you can do the math and say, okay, I need this many at bats and I'm going to start now. And you just start doing it, and you learn as you go what it feels like. And you have the conversations with other investors, and you sit in the room and watch pitches, and you get the reporting and you read it, and you over time will become much more comfortable, but it just takes that first time to get started.
Hi, I'm back. Can you guys hear me? Yes, awesome. Okay, thank you, Gail. That was pretty much my question. There was one point that you made when we spoke before that really resonated with me, and I think it's powerful. And so I just want to maybe have you speak to that just a bit more, which has to do with one of the ways this fear can manifest. You know, when women are scared, it's that they're more comfortable investing in a silo, you know, acting alone. And while it's better to invest than not invest, that actually sometimes that's kind of the wrong way to think about it. Because if you're investing as a group, either because you're running a fund or maybe as part of an angel group, there are benefits to the recipient of the investment.
Yes, I very much encourage everybody to join an angel group or 2 or 3 so that you get more reps in, and you don't have to write checks in all of them, but the more that you see and the more that you hear how others think about the deals is very helpful. And the same is true for a fund manager. I think a first foray into this world, investing in a fund, is better than doing one direct deal in a silo, because you have volume from that fund manager and you're relying on the networks and the expertise of that fund manager to get the portfolio approach without having to do a lot of that work yourself, which you may not have time or interest or networks to do. So either of those approaches is very good as a starting point.
Awesome, thank you. I just think that's a really powerful point, and it's an important thing to be aware of. Leslie, I love that you channeled Sally Krawcheck. We love Sally Krawcheck with your comment about sex, death, and money. I've heard that too, and it just hasn't been part of the culture, right, for women to talk about money. And I think that that has a lot to do with why this is the case. And I know you mentioned that you went to Harvard Business School. I can't stop thinking about that story you told me about one of the alumni groups there, like a women alumni group. So I was wondering if you'd maybe speak a little bit about that, and then also, just what the implications of that means, for women everywhere, because, there's a lot of business schools and it's probably being read, and it goes into that mindset shift that we all experience.
I think we all got the gist of your question, and I think caveat, like, I'm not like the person that's always like H-bombing and like dropping Harvard Business School in every conversation. It's like super awkward. The reason it's important for me is because I come from nothing, right? Like I come from nothing and I come from nowhere. And I guess, I come from a very nice family in Costa Rica, but it opened the world to me. Green. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. It opened up the world to me and really changed my life. It also, the class that I graduated from was, I think, about a third women, a third to maybe 40%. So it was actually like quite well split. And in the time that I was at HBS, like I was a student like anybody else. Like all of these things never really hit me until I got later on in my career. But as I was raising the venture capital fund, one thing I really like, there was this classmate, this guy, Joe, who lived here in Seattle at the time and had been angel investing and like doing all these things. And he had been kind of a mentor to me as I was trying to figure out what to do with the Female Founders Alliance. And when I finally went to Joe and I said, Joe, I'm gonna make this into a fund. I'm gonna raise a VC fund out of this. He said, oh, I would love to invest. And I was like, mind blown, right? I'm like, really? That easy? He's like, yeah, I would love to invest. I love to invest in my classmates. I invested in Mike's thing. I invested in like Bob's thing. I'm making up the names. And I was like, oh, wait. And I went to the like HBS women's group again on Facebook, which, the HBS women's alumni group on Facebook is a mom group, not a professional group, it's a mom group. And I wrote, hey guys, did you know that our male classmates have been investing in each other's companies like for like a decade? Like I haven't gotten a single pitch from anybody in my class that is a woman. I get a ton of like philanthropy requests. I get a ton of like, can you vote for this thing, blah, 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 right? Well, I never get like, I have a startup. Oh, we lost Green. I
lost her, but she'll rejoin us. Please just go ahead.
I'm just
we'll figure it out.
And like, that post that I wrote like went viral among the group, and everybody's like, I never thought of it that way. So, there are a few of those women that were already organizing into an angel group. And so that angel group got bigger. A bunch of the women ended up coming in and investing in my fund. But I think it's so telling to me that like you have, a group of Harvard Business School graduates 15 years down the line, or 12, 13 years down the line at the time, that had fallen pretty hard into traditional gender roles. And these are like some of the most ambitious and prepared businesswomen in the country, right? Like Ivy League MBA graduates. And so many of us had just sort of like, no, my husband does the investing, or like I'm taking a career break. And we just followed those patterns and behaviors, even though we have all of the opportunity, right? Like all of the deal flow, and in theory, we have all the knowledge to take those risks. And you know, it really does take feeling comfortable talking to each other about money, and it really does take coming from a place of plenty and not being afraid of having the conversation and of looking foolish. And to Gale's point, like she's calling it doing the reps. I feel like the first investment you make is going to be the scariest. The second is a little less scary. The third is a little less scary. And you don't have to make huge investments. You can really start very, very, very small, as long as you are being, I think the one thing that I ask, kind of coming from a founder background, is to be responsible in how you affect the company with your small investments, right? You don't want to be like a highly taxing small angel investor. That's bad for the company, and we can talk about that. But other than that, like you can bring so much more into your investing, both in angel groups, like within an angel community, but also like, you know, these emerging funds that all three of us are running, and there's hundreds of women running emerging funds and trying to close them. These are essentially startups, and like we are the venture capitalists of the future, right? Like we also constitute a tiny fraction of venture capital dollars that are being invested in the publicly listed companies of tomorrow. So we need that uplift in order to grow our entire ecosystem too. So I like to think of like those LPs that are coming into the smaller funds are kind of angel investing into a small fund. They're putting dollars into the companies that we're investing in, but they're also helping us build like multi-generational VC funds that are going to invest differently from traditional Silicon Valley. Breen, how's your Wi-Fi?
I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on. I mean, it is raining, but I really apologize. So I'm not sure where we are in the arc of the discussion. My apologies for kind of ducking out for a few minutes. Have we moved to the sort of third general discussion topic of why is it so important that we understand these gender dynamics and buck the trend? Because I do think, you know, this is really at the heart and soul of why we are all here today. So I really want to get to this. You know, what's in it for us? And also, how do we do it? So, you know, just some real specifics on both those points. So I wanted to, Virginie, hear from you a little bit. So you talked about this when it comes to the statistics and, you know, kind of structural, like how funds are structured and all the rest. So maybe we can hear a little bit about how there is this incredible economic opportunity here if those statistics become less bleak. You know, there are so few women that are writing checks. There are so few women getting funded. Those two things are not a coincidence. And why do we care? I mean, so you made the point about, you know, your thesis, and your thesis will, you know, sort of, it will lead to more women getting funded. But the point is not that you're funding women. I mean, you know, that's nice, but like the point is that you're going to make a lot of money. So maybe you can just kind of unpack that a little more. Like, why is it a good investment for us to start thinking differently?
Yeah, I think we wanted to start talking about like the how and the things that perhaps people don't know about investing in a fund, right? So there are some structural kind of limitation in terms of, you often hear about fund have a minimum to get into, and what does that mean for me? Is it necessarily inaccessible to invest into a fund because those minimums are so high? So we wanted to demystify that a little bit, I think. So I'll start by setting some context. So there's in a very traditional kind of fund, context, right? From a regulatory standpoint, a fund is limited to no more than 99 investors if it's over a $10 million fund. If it's under 10 million, then you can have up to 249 LPs, right? So what that means typically is that as much as fund managers, I think we would love to have as many investors as possible, including some very small checks if there are some new investors to the VC asset class, or women who've never invested before, or men for that matter, who want to start dipping their toes into VC and think that a fund strategy is appropriate for them. There are some limitations around the number of spots that we have, right? So if you're raising a $11 million fund, you just need to make it work such that your minimum is 11 million divided by 99 LPs. So that limits your ability, unless you can raise some capital from people who are going to write really large checks, right? That limits your ability in terms of taking 5K checks, say. So we just wanted to like put that out there. The second thing I think that is often misunderstood is that a commitment is typically over a period of time, right? So the fund is going to be typically created, formed for 10 years. The investment period is typically up to 5 years. The managers will call that capital over time, right? So it's not like you make an investment today, you say, great, I'm ready to commit 100K to this fund. It's not like you have to have the 100K in the bank today when you sign the documents, right? The manager will have a schedule typically and say, I will call 30% or 33% over the next 3 years, say, and make my investment kind of progressively over time, right? So those are two things I think, and Gale and Leslie had other things I'm sure to add, but where we wanted to get the conversation started on the how and kind of demystifying. There's a lot of different fund models out there that make it easier for new investors to invest a smaller amount is the first point. And then the second point is not everything needs to be in the bank the moment you decide to invest it. So just take those two items into consideration.
Thank you, Virginie. And I did catch most of that, although I'm still bouncing here and there. I really am sorry. Gale, can you speak a little bit about who can become an LP? So I feel like sometimes, especially as women, we feel like we need to be highly, highly credentialed. You know, we need to maybe spend a lot of money and go to a lot of classes and, you know, maybe get an MBA. And, you know, what do we need to do in order to be qualified to be effective as a limited partner?
It's a simple definition that the SEC provides called accredited investor. And the two primary thresholds are one, income based. So you make $200,000 a year as a single person for at least 2 years, or if you have a partner, the two of you make 300,000 plus in income per year for at least 2 years, or you have $1 million in net assets outside of your primary residence. So most people are accredited through one of those two vehicles. And that allows you to be an LP in any fund. Now, if you are not accredited, there are other avenues to invest. If you invest directly into startups, a startup can take up to 30 non-accredited investors per company. And then there are also crowdfunding and some other solutions for investing directly. Like we have an angel group that allows both accredited and non-accredited investors to write checks as small as $1,000. But ultimately, the answer is anybody can be an LP as long as you meet that revenue threshold or income or net asset threshold.
Oh, sorry. And aside from just like the SEC, you know, the regulations of what makes you accredited and qualified, what about, so say you're an accredited investor, but you're just nervous that you don't really know, you know, you're not equipped, like you don't have the right, like I feel like a lot of times women fall into this trap and, you know, I don't know, we're too hard on ourselves or we're overthinking it, but what there, like, do we need to go read 10 different books or, you know, could you maybe point people in a direction that's a little more attainable?
Honestly, it's just having conversations with people, and this is a great start. It's meeting with anybody that you know that's in the world of venture and who's raising. I will pop a link in the chat here in a minute for a gentleman named Paul Griffiths, who has a portfolio of emerging managers. So his check size is as an individual. So he's not an institutional investor. He decided he was going to write a number of checks across a portfolio of emerging managers. So if you just kind of look and see what he's done, that's a great example of building out a portfolio of funds. For myself, my check size is not quite as large as Paul's. Mine personally is 25K because that's all that I have, since most of my cash goes into my funds. But I've done 5 or 6 deals so far, and the way that I find them is it's just talking to people. And if I really believe in somebody's thesis and how they're thinking about investing, and it's very differentiated from mine, I will, as long as they're taking as small as 25K, invest in their fund. VC Twitter is also a great place to see who's raising, because there are a lot of small fund managers that are raising via what's called 506C, and those are publicly raised funds. So it's easy to find out what they're raising, what their strategy is, versus a private offering where you would actually need to get an introduction to that fund manager.
So helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Gail. Leslie, so I was wondering if you could maybe channel Sally Krawcheck again and speak a little bit about about how we can tap into the power of the purse, like the collective purse that women have, because there's a whole lot of us, and right now we're not really dipping into that purse. So I'm not sure if you guys can hear me right now, but I'm going to keep talking. Leslie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm starting to feel a little bit like a poor woman, Sally Crouch.
Oh, you can.
Okay, she's amazing. Listen, so I mean, the answer is easy. Start investing, right? Like, join Gale's angel group, join Hustle Fund's angel group, like join Pipeline Angels. Commit. I'm gonna make some presumption. I'm gonna make some assumptions about everybody's income levels here, but commit $10,000 for the first year. Commit $25,000 for the second year. Decide how many companies you're going to invest in, and just like, be ready to lose a little bit of that. You're going to write it off, and then you're going to make some money off of another piece of it. Think of it as, like you're going to, instead of one fancy handbag, you're going to make 5 angel investments in a year. And I don't know what is attainable for each of you, but I think that everybody can have a budget and decide how to invest it. So that's the first thing, is just start investing. Second, start talking to your girlfriends about it. Why can't we have brunch and talk about cool companies and like the amazing things that people are doing? Third, I would say like the best case scenario is not for y'all to just start investing, but to actually become really value adding investors. And that can take one of, I'm going to say 3 things. So the first is, if you are knowledgeable about the space that you are investing in and you have a network in that space, you can be a very valuable investor by unlocking your network for that founder in whatever appropriate ways there are. So like if you are a healthcare lawyer and you're investing in a health tech company, you might be like super helpful and valuable. So like open your purse, open your network, open your time for those founders. The second thing is, if you're not smart about the space that you're investing in, don't take up the founder's time. Like keep up with them, be supportive, but don't, this happens frequently with people who've had corporate careers and then start investing in startups, that you tax the founder's time a lot. Now, I just had a tweet last night that went viral about how much due diligence I do. I think it's really important that we learn how to do due diligence and know about the companies that you're investing in, know about the funds that we are investing in. But one of the things that I like about doing it in the context of an angel group is that the check size is going to be bigger and you can all kind of share that due diligence together. So point number 2, don't tax the founder's time unnecessarily, especially when you don't have the expertise in that space. And then the third thing that I will say to become truly valuable investors to women specifically at scale is I really want us all to move away from the narrative that we invest in women because they are women. Move away from the narrative of like investing in diversity, investing in women is about the impact that we're going to have in the world. There's there's a phrase that I love. It's credited to Scott Fitzgerald. I think my team is here. I quote it to them at least once a week. And the saying goes that the evidence of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing thoughts at the same time. And that's what I'm going to challenge you with. The thought number one is, yes, I personally am going to have huge impact in how I invest in this world, because I am investing in order to change what the NASDAQ looks like by the time my daughters graduate from college. On the flip side is, I think everyone here who has ever accomplished something meaningful, ever, there's someone who questioned whether you accomplished it because of your merit or because you had it easier because you're a woman. This has happened to me over and over and over again. The famous HBS story, oh, it must have been easier because you're Latina, right? Like the raising a venture capital fund, like to my face, I cannot tell you how many male fund managers have told me, oh, it must have been so easy for you to raise. Because like everybody wants to invest. I'm like, you don't know what I went through. You don't know. And we're always going to be questioned. I think it's really, really important for the sake of female founders as an asset class, or female founded companies as an asset class, that we stop investing in them because they are women and start investing in them because they are awesome. So when I think about how I invest, right, like I clearly have a gender focused fund. I invest only in women founded companies, but the way that I talk about it is not, I don't invest in any company because it has women founded companies. I'm not a women's fund. I am a tech fund with proprietary deal flow that happens to be 100% women. And I only select the best of those companies within that. And so the more that we can all kind of push the companies to succeed for the sake of the company and invest in the companies because of the merit of the company and what they are doing, and less because of the mission part of what we do, that is a duality that I think we're going to have to live with for a really long time. But I think it's really important in the world of venture capital to not position ourselves as like the charity case, to not position ourselves as like the impact investment, as the, you know, the good to society that you're going to do on the side, like the legal equivalent of like your pro bono hours. Don't do that to the female funders that you're investing in. Invest because they're amazing.
I love that. Okay, so there were a couple of questions that came in through the chat, and my apologies if you've already answered them, just let me know. But one that came in, what can you say when people tell you that they don't want to invest in a fund just because it is women-led, because women-led doesn't necessarily mean competent? And so this is really kind of close to what you were just saying, Leslie, about, you know, we need to stop saying we're investing in women founders because they're women, but because they're great. Okay, but do you hear that when you're trying to raise your fund? Well, I'm not going to invest in you just because you're a woman. Just because you're a woman doesn't mean you're competent. So then how do you respond? This was a question in the chat.
I mean, like, yes, I came across that, but like, I dare anyone to out execute me. Like, look at what I've done. You know what I mean? Like, it's really hard at some point. And it's actually what I love about my deal flow. Like, by the time they are capable of raising, like, these founders have accomplished so much traction. They're basically undeniable. And I think that you're going to see that for a lot of the fund managers that are out there raising. They're undeniable. They have done amazing things to get to the point where they can actually raise a venture capital fund. So I feel like if anybody looks at like Gale Wilkinson, anybody looks at Virginie, anybody looks at me and says, oh, it's just because she's a woman, I'm like, I don't think I want you as an LP. You're missing the entire point.
True. Well said. And Gale and Virginie, if you had a response, obviously you can jump in. Another question in the chat: if you have a larger check size to invest, is it better to invest it all in one venture or one fund, or is it better to spread it across funds? Anyone can take it.
I'd go across funds. I would at least do 3 or 4 funds if you can. If you have a meaningful amount of money to put forward, trying to get some diversification is really helpful. And remember, the more deals that you do, whether it's funds or directs, you get more information back. So you should expect to see quarterly reporting from your fund managers. That's really insightful for you to figure out what's working, what's not working. Do I like this manager? Can I start to develop my own sense of what I like about these different funds as I, at some point, hopefully can add more to my mix?
But
All
the
great.
only thing I'd add to that is that, I mean, depending on what amount of money we're talking about, right? You're already pretty diversified if you invest in a fund versus like trying to construct a diversified angel portfolio by yourself, right? So if there's like a few thematics that you're looking to invest in, like I would invest in like 3 crypto funds, for example, right? If you're really into crypto, that's great. But like then you just do 1 crypto fund that's doing things thoughtfully, I would say, right? If there's a bunch of thematic or you want to invest in a women-led fund and a men-led fund to see the difference, I don't know, then do that, right? But I think that to a degree, don't spread yourself too thin either, right? And try to invest in the things that kind of move you the most, where you think you want to be engaged and active, right? You don't need to overly diversify, because if you're investing in a fund, you're already pretty well diversified, which is the whole point. So just adding on to that.
I want to add to both of your points, kind of setting the expectation of what it's like to invest in a fund. You can ask how much personal involvement you can have, so that maybe you're able to use the fund as an education. And in some cases, the fund is going to be a little bit more kind of arm's length and not going to be as educational and as network building for you. So like different funds have different opportunities of engagement. And then also many of the pre-seed funds also syndicate their pro rata rights and syndicate their deals. So I very frequently co-invest in my own deals with my LP base. So whereas I would normally only write a $100,000 to $300,000 check, I can complement that with another $100,000 to $300,000 from my own LP base. And so if that's the case for the funds that you're investing in, maybe you want to invest half of it directly in the fund and then save the other half, so that you can pick and choose the deals that you like the most from the deal flow that is coming from that fund. So that way you get a little bit of the best of both worlds.
That's such a great idea. Okay, so before we go to final takeaways, well, actually, let's go to final takeaways because it is 5:59. So let's start with you, Virginie. What is your final sort of tangible takeaway with all the ground we've covered in this discussion to the women listening?
Sorry, I had to move a few things around. The final takeaway is do your research, right? But do it, because it's a massive opportunity. I think you'll learn a lot. You'll find that it's not as scary and that it's actually really fun to do, right? So start to determine what it is that you can afford and then just do it. That's the takeaway for me.
Love it. Gale.
Yeah, start now. It takes, I'm 10 years into my VC deals, and I've only gotten a couple of checks from companies that made it already. And my angel deals started in 2016, and I've gotten 0 back on that. And so remember, there's no like, oh, wait, and I'll be better. I'll be in a better place at some point in the future. Just figure out, back to that math, what can you invest today, and figure out how to deploy that over a couple of years and just get started.
Love it. So practical. Leslie.
Okay, so I would love for everyone here, the next time that you have drinks with a girlfriend, or that you go out to brunch, or that you have a dinner party, that you name drop 3 amazing women-founded companies or funds that you are super excited about having learned about. Just make it a habit to bring up amazing opportunities with your girlfriends every time that you go out. And if you don't know what to talk about, you have 4 examples right here.
I love that. That is so perfect. Okay, thank you for that. And what a great note to end this discussion. My apologies for my internet connection. I hope it wasn't too painful listening to me. Thank you to these amazing women. I know it was not painful listening to them. So thank you, everyone. And we hope to see you at our next Investor Mixer.